Welcome to the Sherman Report. Here's Peter Sherman.
And with the drum roll, hi again. Glad to see you, or more correctly, glad you're seeing me. Interesting show today for you. Two guests, both with lots of worldliness, talking from their experiences and their knowledge about what we'll call the business of the day. In just a few moments, we'll be joined by Andy Stinton. And you're saying, who's Andy Stinton? Well, if the name sounds familiar, Andy is what radio hosts around Toronto have always described as the small businessman. And that would be correct, but I've always thought it diminished Andy's accomplishments and life history. Andy is familiar with broadcasting and showmanship because he was in it back in England, in his native England. But here in Canada, Andy has distinguished himself as a producer of shows, in person, live shows, mostly for industry and large organizations. And he's well known in that community. Some are fairly large and complex, but you know, this particular guy, Andy Stinton, is the kind of guy who could sit in the producer's chair and call the shots in perfect sequence and at the right time while balancing a pair of spinning plates on sticks, one in each hand. And later in the show, we'll have Kevin Gaudet come on board with us, once an aspiring supporter and candidate of the Ontario PC Party, where I got to know him, and once the head of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation as well, now an independent government relations specialist operating his own company, Brightpoint Strategy. That's about 15 minutes away. But now, why don't we meet Andy Stinton? And there's Andy Stinton. Welcome to the Sherman Report, Andy.
I cannot believe, I've known Peter for years and years, and I cannot believe that introduction, because usually you're telling me, stop doing shtick, you're a schmuck, right? And then we have this.
That's in the studio, Andy.
Plates like I'm the Cirque du Soleil of show producers.
Well, you're pretty good at it, people say. I hear that from third parties. So it's not you bragging.
Well,
take the compliment.
I do my bit.
So I was gonna open by saying, did I do you justice with my description? But you've already answered that question. So I think we should go into a topic. And it's interesting. I was driving downtown for an appointment early this morning and listening to a friend of ours. And what the subject of the day was e-bikes, talking about e-bikes, because kids and young adults and older adults are on e-bikes or e-scooters. Some of these things are starting to become a bit of a nuisance and injurious to the people operating them, and they run at high speeds. But the government, nor anybody else, as far as I know, has taken to the business of regulating them in any way, shape, or form. Am I right?
Yes. Well, we obviously, this was not unplanned. We knew we were going to talk about this.
Sure.
This came up from a situation I had where I was driving down the road. I live in Oakville, and I'll use Oakville as an example, but I'm sure it's right across the country, maybe across the world.
You have to tell the people in Montreal and the United States where Oakville is.
Oakville is just outside of Toronto. It is the gem of Canada. Okay, everybody else is living in a slum. We're living in a first-rate condo.
Oh, well, with all due respect, go ahead.
I mean, Australia, they banned the things. Anyway, I was driving along and a kid comes shooting out across in front of me, going a fast speed. I think, this is so easy to hit. So being the grumpy old Englishman, get off my lawn, I said. I followed the kid home and spoke to his mom on the phone. And she goes, yeah, I'll do something about this. Kid's out 2 minutes later. Everywhere I go now, there's these e-scooters, not bikes. So I got a hold of my local councillor, which more people should do, by the way. I'm going to go on another little rant. Everybody moans and bitches on Facebook when they should get a hold of their local councillor, MPP, or MP. Anyway,
and they were reasonably easy to get, you know.
Yeah, it's called an email address, Peter.
That's right.
Yeah.
And somebody will read it.
So anyway, there is a plan in Ontario, a pilot project that wants to state what the local cities should do. My local city has done nothing. They have absolutely no rules to do with this. And here's what I learned. An e-scooter, not a bike, it's a different issue, can go up to 70 kilometers an hour. You don't need a helmet. You don't need any insurance to drive this around. This is wrong. And I cannot.
It's incredible. They make you wear helmets. The kids have to have helmets on bikes. Bikes don't go 70 kilometers, not even close. And kids are warned and raised on bicycles. And I've got a little grandson, 3 years old, and he's got training wheels, and he goes out with his dad, but he's not going on the street. He's on the sidewalk, and he's not bothering anybody. But he will be familiar with bicycles. E-scooters are, here, kid, have an e-scooter, and off they go. And you told a story. Last week, I'm taking a walk in my area. I'm walking along Finch Avenue, and I stopped for a red light. There are cars going by, and I'm not crossing the street. And I hear screeches behind me, and two kids on e-scooters, true story, within the past week, come to a grinding halt right up behind me, I would say a foot, 2 feet behind me. And I turned around and I said, guys, are you allowed to be driving those things on the sidewalk and coming close to hurting a person? Me? And they kind of looked at each other and looked at me. And I'm sure when I walked away, they said, nasty old man. It's like, get off my lawn. But there are no rules. They're not out of order in doing that, but they're doing something that could injure people, and including themselves.
It was the lack, as usual, my local councillors who, to be totally honest, would rather spend time getting the pictures taken at a local event than do anything.
Well,
no, it's true. I mean, I've contacted them before, and it took a month to get a meeting. But these people are not concerned. I'm bringing it up. They put me after a member of staff. And this isn't just a Canadian. In Australia, I believe it was Melbourne, they've made the rental ones illegal. They banned them totally. And somebody needs to do something about this before people are killed. But I also question, because I was the world's best parent, as we know, because everything I do is magic.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah. Why are these people letting their kids out on these death traps? You know, the kid who I stopped said, well, you were on a stop sign. Say I'm not looking. You weren't looking. I could have killed you. What is the matter with parents who are doing this? What is the matter with the politicians, local, municipal, and provincial, who are not doing anything about this? They're not regulating it.
We live in a crazy part of the world. I mean, if you were an electronics-oriented guy, I know you are to a certain extent, we could talk about parking those things inside buildings, and they have a great big lithium-ion battery in them. That can be a problem as well. So we haven't regulated anything, and I think it's good we're talking about it. And I know that people in other media, more broadcasting type media, are talking about it as well. And that's the kind of thing that gets councillors up off their tails and doing something. So let's hope that happens, because this is the Wild West now.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, I'm speechless in many ways. That when I pointed out to the local councillors that they were totally unaware of that there was a pilot project going on by the Ontario government to see how to deal with this. They didn't seem to care.
Okay, let's put that one on the shelf. I think we said as much as we can say, and I hope that we'll see some action. But you and I talked about what we should talk about a couple of days ago, and one of the things that you put forward was you wanted to discuss what you call fake TV news, and I think you wanted to focus on Fox. What's wrong with it?
It's not what's wrong with it. It's wrong with the people that watch it. It's offering a defective and lying product. And I'm a nonpartisan, which is the worst thing to be, because if you have an opinion to the left, the right says you're left and blah, 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 blah. But I'm very much of the mind that there's different governments for different scenarios in time. I admire people like you, Peter, that are a conservative, and that's your belief. I just couldn't eat fish and chips all my life with no choice. But Fox News, and it's people who I've spoken to recently who quote Fox News as the gospel, and that you cannot have a discussion. And I love a good debate. You cannot have a discussion with them because their information source has no basis in fact.
So they're quoting Fox News as fact.
Yes, they're quoting it as fact. A friend of mine said the other day, so, well, this Harris woman, she's dumb. So that night, I take it in my 10 minutes every night. I watch Fox for my penance. You know those monks that used to do self-flagellation, walking? Well, that's what I'm doing with watching Fox. It's self-flagellation.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I'm going to make an admission. I watch Fox, but I don't only watch Fox. I watch MSNBC sometimes, and I find that MSNBC is the counterpoint. Okay, and you have to understand what they are. So let me try this on you. You've been associated with broadcasting, so have I, for much of our lives. And what we know is that broadcasting, at least in the commercial realm, exists because we can sell commercials to people that fund what we're doing. And in the case of Fox, they've decided to target a right-wing older demographic, and that's what they get. MSNBC has targeted a left-wing younger demographic. CNN, I don't think at this point we could say they targeted anybody, so they're up in the mushy middle. But you could bring it to Canada. Do you believe that CBC tells you an accurate truth, or do you think that they're slanted?
I think it's a great question. I think that every news source or every human being has a slanted view. You have no choice. I say I'm nonpartisan, and I am by and large, but you could probably find, I don't know which way I lean actually, but everybody's somewhat partisan. But people like Fox and MSNBC, it's out there. What's the point? Why not go to a BBC, a Reuters, a Sky News? Many of these people that try to be up the center, they at least make an effort. CNN is obviously Democrats, but last night I was watching an interview with one of the exchange prisoners. Meanwhile, Fox was, debasing Harris. No, I think it's unhealthy for our society. I think they should be. But this is the bit that gets me. Who's advertising on there? That My Pillow guy.
Who's ultra right, yes, and but also a lot of drug companies that old people need.
I don't watch it. I'm shocked you watch it.
Well, I watch everything. Look, when you mentioned Sky News, when you mentioned BBC, I could have added Deutsche Welle, NHK, I-24 Israel, and a couple more I can't remember. They're all on my cable. They're subscribed to by me. And the reason is, I think that from a news perspective, yes, I have my views, and I'm readily prepared to admit to anybody that I am a conservative thinker and a conservative voter. Having said that, I can't make that decision just because I happen to like, I don't know, Pierre Poilievre, for example. I make that decision based on what I think of the world that I want my children, who are now adults, and my grandchild, who is 3 years old, to grow up in. And I think that balance allows me to take in Fox and understand what is and isn't to be sifted wheat from chaff.
Yeah, but you're an intelligent, knowledgeable person who has worked in the media, and you understand that if you're going to say something, maybe just do a check. And there's multiple fact-checking places out there, multiple fact-checking. So there's no excuse not to have some semblance of the truth in today's society. I mean, I truly believe that. I mean, people who watch Fox News are generally idiots, right? I mean, they've got the IQ of a small rock that they
maybe, but they have huge ratings.
Yeah, okay. So does Kim Kardashian, but it doesn't mean I'm going to get my news off her. Maybe if I wanted breast implants or some fashion advice, I'd go to her, but not for political views. I just think that people, and the other side of this, people need to be more responsible before they vote. Find out the facts. I mean,
the meal that they're eating, I guess, is poison to you. Whatever that expression is, I'm kind of transposing, but chacun a son goût. I'll use that one.
Okay. What was that one?
That was to each his own, basically, en français. Everybody has his taste. And if you take Fox News for what it is, a commercial enterprise, much like CNN, much like MSNBC, not counting all of the other ones which are not commercial, the ones that I've named, they're either state, Sky is commercial, then you're going to get a particular slant. And if you know you're going to get it, then you understand how to take it. And that's with a grain of salt.
Yeah, but if I tune into Fox every night around 5 or 6 o'clock. I sit down and go through the various stations. And
do you watch the 5?
No, I have many. I have Israel TV. I have MSNBC. I flip through them all, but I always go to Fox, and all they're doing is bashing the Democrats at this point.
They do
that is
a
not
lot.
a news point. That is not a news source. That is just bashing him. Meanwhile, on CNN, and I'm not sticking up for CNN, they had an intelligent and well thought out interview with one of the prisoners released from Russia. Well, there's a bit of a comparison. The BBC are covering the world, sometimes I think extraneously, but people need to know. But the thing that bothers me is I try and have a discussion with these Fox News idiots, okay? And they say things like, well, Harris is stupid. Why? Because Fox said it. I mean, really?
Andy, on that point, we agree. You cannot quote that as a fact because somebody said it. You have to do your own work. Critical thinking, which I think is a phrase that you brought up when we chatted the other day, has to do with taking facts and putting them in order and coming to a reasonable conclusion. And saying that Kamala Harris is stupid because Fox told you to is just a bad way to go. Andy, we're out of time.
I got a solution, though, before we go.
Okay.
What happens if we take all the Fox viewers, give them electric scooters, and eventually they'll kill themselves?
I knew we would come to a conclusion that brought both topics into play. Thanks so much, Andy Stinton. Good to have you.
See you later. Thanks, man.
You bet.
You're with the Sherman Report. Daily news commentary available at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, with video posted on YouTube and Facebook. Here's Peter Sherman.
All right, I gave you a brief description of my friend Kevin Gaudet at the opening of the show, but if you just joined us, here's the skinny on Kevin. Kevin and I met when he was an aspiring supporter and then a candidate of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, where I got to know him. He didn't get elected, but that was when the PCs occupied the opposition benches in Ontario. Kevin is better known nationally for his association with, my phone is ringing, you know that? I forgot to turn it off. However, we'll let it go by. This is what live TV is about. He was with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, where he fought for taxpayer rights. The Federation is still around and still fighting. Question is, how much headway can you make with spendthrifts like those in the Trudeau government? And the guy to ask is Kevin Gaudet. He's now an independent government relations specialist operating his own company, Brightpoint Strategy. And let me bring him on stage. Kevin, good to see you. Well, I don't have your audio. Are you there? For some reason, I cannot.
No, I'm not. I had muted myself in an effort to avoid problems and then created one.
Okay, so you muted yourself and I had a phone ringing, but here we are. Good to have you aboard. It's one thing to fight for taxes, you know. That works for all of us. It's quite another to help make us all poorer. And I think these days, if we're looking at Ottawa, that's what's happening. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I agree with your statement. I'm not sure I'd want to limit it just to Ottawa, though.
No, I wouldn't. But I'm pointing the finger at Ottawa right now.
I mean, you're asking me to put on my hat from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation some 15 years ago, and I'm happy to do that because my disposition hasn't changed philosophically. Excuse me. I mean, the Canadian federal government has made life nothing but more expensive on an ongoing basis. From increasing taxes on the personal level on the higher end, the middle and higher income brackets. And then especially recently with the capital gains tax change, they increased the inclusion rate on income for capital gains, which will cost people who maybe, for example, own a second home and sell it as their retirement. You know, let's say you're a private sector individual and you own a second house as a retirement program because you don't have a pension plan like our cushy politicians and you sell it. You'll pay, roughly speaking, 20% more on taxes. So yeah, it's a large, wide problem at a time where you see high inflation and increased living costs. Then you have like a perfect storm of cost problems for individuals, and the government doesn't seem to care about the one thing they can control, which is its spending and its taxation levels. Well,
so that brings me to another question. Do you think, as I do, that the Liberal government we have now in Ottawa is trying to create something akin to equality of results? Because I always believed in equality of opportunity, but equality of results, it's never worked. And really, if I use the word that should apply to that, it's socialist.
Well, I'm one of those people who certainly agree with you on this, that there's such a move it seems like a broader Western ideological disposition, actually, in modern Western society, where there's this desire for every problem to be solved by government, which drives up costs because you've got governments doing everything. And as you point out, relatedly, you've got a bunch of people in the Canadian government federally who believe in that phenomena of wanting to do everything for everyone, and this equal outcome where, like you said, we used to believe in giving people equal hands and give them equal access, and then the outcomes will be what they will. We don't seem to have that so much anymore, where they've created this resentment against those who succeed, work hard, succeed, and get ahead. And increasingly, we see this federal Liberal government wanting to tear those types of people down.
Well, I see things like, for example, one of the announcements that came during the budget period, and that budget was meant to be a big sell, and I think it kind of dropped like a lead balloon. But one of the things was they were going to feed lunch to 400,000 needy kids. And I said to myself, they're going to feed them lunch starting on a particular day. What did they eat up to that day? And my answer to myself is they ate the lunch that mom packed for them because mom could afford to get that lunch packed because she didn't have to pay a carbon tax. I mean, it's a shell game.
Yeah, well, and I'm not even sure if they can't afford to buy their lunches. There's a few problems that bother me about this stuff. I don't know about you, but it starts to make my head explode, because it seems that any elected government, and I live in the city of Toronto, the largest city in Canada, and the mayor here, all they ever want to do is provide more and spend more, and the provincial government, and they don't care what level of government the decisions affect. The same with the provincial governments, they're all over the place. And now the federal government, as you point out, are undertaking programs which traditionally and constitutionally aren't the responsibility, whether or not it's lunches or maybe tampons in men's bathrooms in federally regulated institutions, and a long list of things that they wastefully spend money on that have nothing to do with the services that they're supposed to deliver. We could throw in the new dental healthcare program that they're talking about. And then on top of that, they're also talking about increasing a Medicare free drugs, I don't mean illegal drugs, but free medical drugs programs. But it never seems to end. And in the meantime, our Canadian Armed Forces, when they're out in Latvia, for example, they have to go find their own meals because they're not serving them and they don't give enough per diems.
Yeah, it's the way it is. So a straight question, because this one is top of mind, is the carbon tax, or the carbon rebate, as it's called now, a workable system, and does it achieve anything? What does it achieve?
Well, I mean, your question leads. I'm just moving my cat.
I was answering the phone, and you're moving the cat. That's the great thing about operating out of your home office.
Yeah, I mean, COVID changed so much with us living and working from home. Hopefully, there's a greater tolerance for people with some of the challenges we all face with animals and pets and phones. I'm not a fan of any carbon tax. If anything, I think we should be doing. Governments ought to be undertaking mitigation strategies. If there are going to be weather events, I'd rather see them deal with mitigating it. Living in the city of Toronto, for example, there is a large road called the Don Valley Parkway, and during large rainstorms, it floods tremendously. Instead of putting in place a tax, taking more money out of people's pockets, and in many cases giving some of it back to some different people, redistributing the income, I'd rather they actually, if they're going to spend any money at all, they fix the infrastructure so we don't have the impacts on these flooding programs. So the answer is, to your question, is no, I don't like carbon taxes. I don't like them doing any of these types of programs. I don't think they do anything. I don't think that our weather's going to change because you're making me pay more for my gasoline to take my kids to hockey.
Oh, but Kevin, they're giving it back to you in a check sometimes.
And that's just so absurd, right? And how can that work?
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't understand it. And if you had an explanation,
well, you're asking the wrong guy to explain it, right? I mean, you can get one of these liberal socialists on to explain how it would make sense that on one hand they say they're going to put in place a tax and give you the money back, but that's supposed to also then change your behavior such that it'll benefit the environment. And I just don't see how you can square that circle.
There you go. Well, when a guy like NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, for example, blames Loblaws, he says Galen Weston caused this inflation because look at the prices that he's charging in the Loblaws stores, or Metro, or Sobeys, or any of the big guys. So he blames them. I believe that he is speaking unknowingly. Is that Kitty?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe he's speaking unknowingly about the result, or is it about the cause? Because I mean, sure, the prices in Loblaws are too high, but I don't think I'm prepared to aim at Loblaws and pull the trigger. I think it's because we spend $60 billion more than we have at budget time.
Well, I think there's two problems. I certainly agree with your assessment on the fact that the federal government spends way more money than it ought to, because it hasn't had a balanced budget in ages and has more than doubled the debt that our children and their children are going to have to pay for, because as deficits and debts are just deferred taxation. But with respect to the grocery stores, I mean, the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, has these bumper sticker slogans about the greedy grocery stores, and it doesn't get any deeper than that. I'd actually like to have a more thoughtful conversation with people about whether or not our grocery stores are properly competitively monitored. I think about any number of them that are increasingly fully vertically integrated. They choke out competitive products off the shelves. And now they own drugstores and they're expanding into healthcare. But when I think about the SKUs on shelves, if there's a successful SKU, increasingly President's Choice will build its own product or buy its own product and replace that successful SKU and choke that product out of the market. And I see that as a competitive problem that genuinely could be looked at.
I'm the guy who walks around with my wife and pushes the cart because she doesn't drive. So I take her to the grocery store. The result of that is I know that butter is the best part of $9 a pound. And I know that a decent rib steak is the best part of $30 a pound. And I say to myself, you're basically a retired guy. I mean, I do this because I love it. But my income is basically investment income. And I'm looking now at two people who don't overeat, who don't eat between meals, and who spend $300 a week on food. And I'm not counting restaurants. Saying $300 a week is a grocery order. I don't think most people can afford that.
Well, I mean, this takes us back to the first question you presented with respect to the issue of cost of living. And yeah, I mean, the cost of groceries are insane. Every time you show up, and even if it's a single little bag, it's $150.
Yeah.
That's problematic. And I would rather see politicians have a deeper, more thoughtful conversation about the elements in that cost chain and the things that they can control within it and control them properly. Bumper sticker slogans aren't going to do it. Deficit spending is not going to do it. If anything, they just need generally to get their government spending under control, increase productivity in the country so that businesses make more money and can therefore return that profit, an evil word these days, profit into the pockets of their workers.
Profit is good.
Yes.
It keeps people employed and it keeps companies around. I got one last question before we say good evening. Can Ottawa take a lesson from Doug Ford? Because he's thinking on whether we keep going with the provincial portion of the tax on gasoline not being payable for the past 3 years at the pump. And whether we go forward on, and knowing a little bit about Doug Ford, I suspect that that's exactly what he'll do. Why isn't Ottawa coming to that party, knowing what they know, which is the same as the rest of us, that people are having a really hard time?
Well,
I know. I want you to answer all the questions of the world.
No, but you're asking me why the federal Liberal government will do nothing to reduce cost of living in anything they can control. It's like almost asking why a duck likes to swim, right? Because they love their income and they don't, because these are things about which they just don't care. And they're ideologically, like Stephen Guilbeault, the former criminal and now in environment minister. And when I say criminal, because he was incarcerated, like it's not just a slag, it's a fact. He was incarcerated for his protest to do with the environment. They don't like cars, they don't like emissions unless they're from their jets on vacations, the classic hypocrisy. I mean, the Ford government in Ontario deserves a tremendous amount of credit because they've taken off the gas tax, they removed the license renewal fees. Like these are important elements of cost, and every year, simply put, every government should find every single tax they can and reduce it or get rid of it. Because there's too much government that costs too much, and it's hurting our abilities as families to buy groceries and get our kids to hockey.
Hear, hear. And I'll say with that, Kevin, thank you for being on. It seems we're both conservatives. And for anybody watching who thinks that we're big bad people who want to take your money or help companies take your money, no. What we want to do is let you keep your money by not taxing every damn thing that comes along. And the conservative says it all. Kevin, thank you.
Thank you. It's about freedom, right? I want to have the freedom to choose for myself so that I can live a good and virtuous life with my money the way I choose to.
There you go. Thank you very much, Kevin Gaudet.
Thank you.
What a pleasure. And that's the end of our show for another day. This is a Tuesday. And I think we can look forward to a couple of good guests tomorrow as well. I hope you enjoyed that. 2 interesting conversations. And that's what we do here on the Sherman Report. Take care and see you tomorrow.
The Sherman Report, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the video version at YouTube, Facebook, and always at petersherman.com. Thanks for listening to the Sherman Report. If you'd like to connect with Peter directly, just go to petersherman.com.